Hello, and thank you for joining our Stream of Conscious ADHD podcast. I'm Heidi Fawcett, along with my sister Heather. We are Gen X in menopause and, surprise, newly diagnosed with ADHD. Since we found out about our ADHD during the pandemic, we have spent most weekends sitting in my backyard in Brooklyn with our champagne brunch discussing the impact, the reflections, the grief, the stories. Many adults are now finding they were never diagnosed, so we thought we would bring everyone into our backyard discovery sessions, hoping it will help. We laugh, we cry, we are stream of consciousness conversationalists. We hope you enjoy listening to our discovery and perhaps glean some comfort from it. Here we go, into the backyard.
So our topic was and Heather and I do this often. We'll be like with our friends out having a good time, and we make plans with them for the next weekend or the whatever, or they invite us to something and we're like, yeah, totally. And then the next day we're like, oh, why? Because I don't have the energy to do that. I don't want to have to deal with that situation. I don't want to put on clothes and go. There's so many things, right? And so when I was doing research on that, and it's so funny because so many things came up like, why do so many people constantly flake out on plans? I'm like, they have ADHD. And this again makes sense. Everything that we're talking about today goes back to a trait that we are aware of, but we didn't associate it to that trait. And this one, it correlates with anxiety, which we know is a comorbidity, and it's called anticipatory anxiety, where you're like, oh my God, I'm thinking about this thing and it's going to be, oh. And they were like, resist the urge to cancel plans. Yeah, it's very hard to resist.
And I remember you used to get so upset with me.
I know, but I didn't understand what was happening.
I didn't know either.
But the thing,
before we go on, we have to explain.
But yes, go.
So when Heidi and I were in our early 20s, everything was very social. We actually worked together at the same company, but not in the same group. And we had the same group of friends at our work. When you're in your 20s, there's nothing better than the group hangout, the bonding socially and at work was just like the best. So we would have events in which Heidi would say, oh, you got to come to this thing. And I'd be like, yeah, okay. But then I would not go because the anxiety around it for me was too much. In the moment, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And then I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And Heidi took it very personally.
Yes.
And it wasn't personal. It was just me. My anxiety was too much. Like whatever was, I don't even know what was happening. I didn't know at the time, and I still don't know. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
It's anticipatory anxiety.
It was too much for me.
Oh, and by the way, that it inputs directly into social anxiety.
Yeah.
And social anxiety is the number one most common comorbid condition for people with ADHD. But my thing was, I'd have a pool party at my house and she would say she'd show up and then she didn't show up. And I was always just so crushed. And she would say, why did you need me there? You've got all these people surrounding you. I'm like, but you're the one person I wanted there. Like these people mean nothing. Not that they meant nothing to me, but you were the one I wanted to hang out with. And that's the thing that I didn't understand. So just goes to show you that you may be impacting people in a way you don't realize, or you may be being impacted by people not realizing it's just their ADHD.
Or you could be literally in the same family, all have ADHD.
Yay.
But everybody's symptoms are slightly different.
But it was not funny, not funny. When I Googled this, why do I excitedly make plans with friends? And then what was the end of it? And so the things that came up were Quora. When I have plans to hang out with somebody, I always freak out. Why do I do that? Why do I say yes to plans and then I don't really want to do them? Why do people with depression or anxiety flake? It makes complete sense. So the mismatch between the abstractness of our plans when they're in the distance and their concrete nature once they are imminent is what causes people to be flaky. And I just would like to know what it feels like not to have that. I mean, there's so many
The
things.
social butterflies, they're the ones who don't understand this because they're just like, I'm going to everything, I'm doing everything. And they don't have these things that are pulling on them underneath the surface. They're just showing up for the thing.
Right. And again, ties into the dysmorphia, the rejection sensitivity, because you go to a place and if you feel like you're not fitting in or whatever, there's still social weight on that. That's just,
Yeah. I remember your ex-husband came to my apartment to yell at me for this particular thing.
oh,
When I was living on McDougal Street in New
oh,
York, you guys were living at the end of the street. And and I appreciate his desire to try to fix a problem, but he was telling me how upset you were because I was doing this thing. And this was when we were in New York. Well, he came to my, maybe he warned me slightly in advance, but I was not sure why he was there. And so I was very prickly. I'm like, I don't know what you want from me. And he's like, Heidi just loves you and wants this. And that. He was doing his best. And I got to give him credit because he was trying to bridge a gap. And I was like, you don't even know. And I just felt very attacked.
Yeah,
So my response was thus. And I'm sure he was like, we shouldn't have done this because we all see these things from our own perspectives. But I give him credit. Maybe
Yeah.
next time I see him, I will be like, dude, remember that day you came to my apartment? You came at me and I was like, "Rah."
And that was probably the one and only romantic thing he ever did. Sorry, Lee. Anyway, and then the third topic that I had listed was the buying the exercise equipment and never using it, or starting a hobby that just gets ignored. And when I Googled this earlier, one of the things that made me laugh out loud, and Heather as well, is that one of the titles of the articles that came up for the hobby thing, because you guys probably can relate to this, the title of the article is Collecting Hobbies, the Ultimate ADHD Hobby, which just, that's it in a nutshell. And there was even questions like, can people with ADHD stick to one hobby? Well, no, unless it's like it ignites your dopamine. If you have a hobby that's fueling your dopamine, then of course you're going to stick with it. But anyway, so I am one of those people who have spent hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars on exercise equipment that I never use. I bought a gym membership that I went to the gym twice. That was back when we were at BTG in the new building, because there was a discount for BTGers at the gym and I got sucked into it. But anyway, well-intentioned. And every time I do it, I buy a piece. It's 5 years later and I go, but I will use this. I will. It will not collect dust. I will use this. And the last one I bought was during the pandemic and have used it maybe twice. That is one of my big guilty things. But when looking into it with ADHD, I'm sure that this could happen with normal people. But I don't
Are
want to
you
say
fine?
normal.
We're not normal.
Yeah, well, our brain just works differently.
Less interesting people.
Exactly.
They're less
They're
interesting.
not spicy at all.
That's right.
So I was reading something and this was Ask Metafilter. I don't even know what that is, but it came up in the search. And it was like, why do people buy gym memberships and never use them? Why do people buy guitars and noodle around for a few weeks and then never touch it again? Why do people buy $200 worth of cake decorating equipment and then make 2 cakes ever? And it says it's not like people buy them and think, oh, I'm glad I bought this piece of equipment specifically to let it gather dust. The intent is to use them, and that they find that they don't really want to use them. because it's that you're purchasing or you're starting a hobby and purchasing things for the hobby as an aspirational, like, this is what I would like to do. This is who I would like to be. But your ADHD is like, nope, that's not you. You're not that. This has no dopamine hit for me. So that is not you.
So the buying gets you the dopamine, but the doing does
Right.
not.
The thought of it, like, I'm going to do this. That is exactly how I am with the buying the equipment. I'm like, this is different. It's not an exercise bike. It's not an ab thing. I'm not on an infomercial. All I have to do is walk on this treadmill. That's all I got to do. I can watch TV while I can eat while I'm doing it. That's all I have to do.
Can I eat ice cream while I'm on the treadmill?
Yes. I would do it too. But
The cat's
oh my
being
God.
super cute.
This the cuteness
You
of
need
this
to
kitten.
add a photo
I
of
will.
the cat
I will.
on the podcast so
will.
they understand the utter absurd cuteness. I'm taking the picture and I'm sending it to you so you can add it to the podcast.
Okay, absolutely.
Look at her. Absurd.
She's a Muppet.
She is a Muppet.
So in the article that was entitled Collecting Hobbies, the Ultimate ADHD Hobby, which I will love forever, and the subtitle of it is How ADHD Has Explained My Jack of All Trades, Master of None personality. Yes. And so the first segment is Confessions of a Hobby Hoarder.
I think this is super interesting. I don't have the same issue. I've had gym memberships and I actually went to the gym.
Yes, I always wondered how you managed.
I've always been that person who could do that. I enjoyed it. But I'm one of these people that I know enough about topics that people think that I know a lot about a topic. And I think pretty much everybody that I know as friends thinks I know a lot about things.
Yes.
But what I do know is a reasonable amount of lots of things, but not a ton, but like enough.
If somebody were to drill down into something, you'd be like, I'm out.
Right. Yeah. But I do know enough about a lot of things because I'm interested. I'm curious. I'm curious enough to spend an inordinate amount of time wormholing on Wikipedia so that I read something, I'm like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And somebody will ask me about it later and I'll be like, oh, yeah, I actually read about that. And they think I know everything about it. But what I know is enough to carry on a conversation. So people think I'm smarter than I am, except sciencey things. I know those.
Yeah. And that's usually what people are asking you about because we all think you're our physician. But the thing about that, and again, that the difference between you and me and our things is that I would read it, but not retain it.
But if I'm wormholing to it, it's because I really want to know and I'll remember it. If I'm forced to read something, I'll never remember it.
And so maybe I'm just not interested in anything. I just feel like I was talking to Grace about this the other day because she has to do summer reading, which she is like, why can't we just have a summer break? Why are you making us do schoolwork on summer break? But she has a hard time because she will read and she will retain what is said, but she doesn't understand the book, how it fits together. She can explain to me the last 5 pages she read, but maybe it was a prelogue or maybe it was like they went back in time to think about something that happened and she didn't follow them back in time. She thinks it's happening in the moment that the book is happening and she's reading it. That's something that we need to address, but the reading stuff is just hard, whether you have dyslexia or the working memory piece of it or whatever.
Well, for me in particular, reading fiction is something that's always been required, and I have not been entirely into it. There's some stuff that I read it and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, but I'm a nonfiction person. People are like, oh, read this novel. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I'd much rather read a biography.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's a certain segment of us that are like, oh, this is just learning something. If you were to look at any of my books, you will not find a lot of novels.
Yeah.
You will not find novels here about like random whatever. It's all nonfiction. And it's because it's like learning a factoid or a whole book of factoids.
Right. Whereas some people hate not. I think Grace is one that she doesn't like nonfiction unless it's, again, something she's really interested in. Like, she read this book on Eleanor Roosevelt, but she was just like riveted by it. I was like, yay, Heather will be happy
my
to hear that.
heavenly, I did not know this. This has inspired me. She also come at her with all kinds of stuff she doesn't want to know.
She's also very drawn to Martin Luther King Jr. And there are a couple people she just gravitated towards. But anyway, as far as the hobby thing,
Or the staying on the thing, right?
well, yes, because again, it all goes back to the dopamine and your neurotransmitters or whatever. It's one of the neurotransmitters. And it's so hard to move beyond that. I was doing a recording earlier about hygiene and how difficult it is to be mom with ADHD, having a child that has ADHD, and you want to be a role model for them and lead by example, but you don't want to take a shower.
Fake it till you make it.
And now I forget why I brought that up. But in this article where the hobby hoarder, he says when he was in college, he just started taking everything. He called it the collecting knowledge. It's like you want to be a professional learner because you would just love to go and just learn everything. I think that was his thing as well. But he was like, as a child, trying gymnastics, judo, swimming, watercolor painting, dance, reading, took part in musical instruments. And then he said the one characteristic that almost all these hobbies shared, the brevity of my interest. And I think that we all go, oh my God, I'm lazy or I'm not cultural because I don't have any interest in this anymore.
Or there's something wrong with me because I can't fulfill, I can't see it through.
And it is diminishing to your identity, your self-confidence. You just think, what the hell? And it's just sad. But he also is like, how to hoard hobbies. Step 1, randomly stumble upon an interesting subject or hobby.
On Wikipedia.
Yeah. Step 2, research intensely. Take a deep dive into special interest forums, social media groups, collect and read a bajillion beginner tutorials, compile lists of necessary gear, read countless reviews of said gear. Step 3, annoy family and friends with impromptu monologues littered with far too many details for any layperson to understand and enjoy. Step 4, convince myself that this time it will be different. Like I said with the equipment, this time I will keep at it. Step 5, spend a lot of money to finally get started on the new hobby. Step 6, lose interest. Step 7, be reminded of the abandoned hobby when I walk by the unfinished projects and unused accessories laying around, feeling guilty until I put it away, out of sight, out of mind. Step 8, despair at my flakiness. Why can't I just stick with something for once? I'll never be good at anything. And this is the crux of how I feel.
And for having hobbies, that's one thing. And I can see how that's very disheartening where you want to develop something into something that you're the best at. But I see this a lot in people at a more basic level when it comes to their job.
Career, yes.
Where you can't hold a job for very long because you burn out on it or you lose interest in it. And in the morning when it's time to wake up and you think about having to go to that job and you're like, nope, I'm not doing it. You fall down this rabbit hole of all these successive jobs. And I hear about this a lot as well, which is a little more damaging to people than hobbies.
Oh, absolutely.
Although
it's part of the ADHD text.
Exactly.
Our reason for this podcast is to support and uplift women in recognizing the impact undiagnosed ADHD has on their lives and to know that they are not alone. Discovery and grieving for what life could have been if we had only known and had help can be hard sometimes. If you have any thoughts you would like to share, you can email us at genx.adhd.sisters@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Hashtag Gen X ADHD Sisters.